You're looking good. Welcome tonight to our Parent Academy series that our PTA thought of. So we have parent academies throughout the year, and the goal is to really make sure that our parents feel connected to the school, equipped, informed, academically, but really what our PTA helps us think of is ways that parents can feel equipped in the social and emotional health of their kids. So our amazing PTA has been thinking about this extended distance learning time, the amount of technology our kids have anyway, and the amount of technology they have under these circumstances, and have brought us an amazing guest speaker for a series of three, unheard of, three nights for us to grow and learn together. So I'm going to pass it to Judy, who can introduce our speaker.
Yay. Okay, so I have something written out. I'm not a good reader. Doreen Dodgen-McGee is a beautiful, intelligent, compassionate human who also happens to be a doctorate in psychology. She has 28 years of experience working in private practice and with individuals and groups. She is a reluctant geek, spending inordinate amounts of time interacting with scholarly research, tech trends, and pop culture around the topic of technology and how the digital domain is shaping us. Far from being technologically phobic or averse, she works to bring balanced view of the new realities, working to inspire people to become moderate and well-informed, not abstinent, in their tech engagement. She is also the author of the Nautilus award-winning book, Deviced, Balancing Life, Technology in the Digital World. She loves going barefoot, exploring big cities, black coffee, thinking deeply, the color red, dancing, documentaries, art, silence, and people, especially people. And she's an amazing aunt and an amazing sister. And you guys are all super lucky to be here. Take it away.
Thank you, Judy. Oh, I am really honored to be with you all, and I orient space a little bit. I'm hoping that you may have brought something to play with along with a pen and a piece of paper or a notepad. And if not, feel free to go get them or sit yourself down on the floor, pull your screen down there so you can be doing some yoga if you want. Learn better together tonight if we are moving and not just staring at a screen, as you all know. I also want to let you know I'm going to be speaking for about 45 to 50 minutes. And then after that time, I will take questions and you can ask me whatever you want to ask me. I've spent the last 15 years traveling around the country and speaking with 1,000 physicians, educators, university students, high school students, and parents. So I have not only the scholarly research I can bring to you, but also the anecdotal research circle to be a part. What I have found with this topic is that everybody has a wonderful story and 10 or 12 horrible stories about technology and about 1,000 questions. And so, hey, Tom, I'm having my high-tech person come and help me out here. Tom? It's saying that my internet is unstable, which I know it is not, but I want to check on. I will hold your question till the end, and then at that point, you're welcome to put questions in the chat, or you can say them out when we're all done. So I'll be speaking for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we'll have question and answers. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And if you all have issues with seeing me, maybe Jackie or Judy, you can text me and let me know things are going sideways if that happens. Here we go. Takes me just a second here to get everything set up. Okay, I will let you know if it says it again. My husband is here helping me as my IT person. Okay, what I want to start with tonight is just that I have so much empathy for you all. You did not ever dream, nor did your administration or teachers, that you would all have to be navigating a complete year of online learning. And even if we weren't talking about school during the pandemic and helping kids manage technology during the pandemic, I would be saying that I hope that we can all come to the topic together, really from a framework of immense empathy toward each other, toward our children, toward our children's teachers, and also that we would kind of listen to the information I'm bringing tonight from the framework of thinking about how we can begin to have non-shaming conversations with our kiddos, because that is the only way in which we are going to make any changes. I wish like everything, this is such a hard topic for me to talk with schools and parents about this year, because I wish like everything could just say, it's all fine, you're gonna be great, you don't need to, good enough is good enough and we're all fine. The problem is that there are some things about technology that really can hurt our kids, and some habits that if we let them get too far entrenched, even in this time where we are very much and understandably reliant on tech, can really be hard for them to come out of after the pandemic. So before the pandemic even started, I was talking about the fact that this phrase IRL, which in the research just refers to in real life, is actually a misnomer. There is no such thing anymore as a real life and a digital life. Really, all of our lives, especially this year, just kind of merged together. And the experiences, I mean, we all know this, the experiences that we have in our digital spaces, our online spaces, very much impact our embodied spaces and vice versa, right? Especially this year, as not only has school gone online and all of our socializing gone online, but we also have some new platforms that are literally made in such a way as to be very, very, very dependence forming. So places like Twitch, where we can communicate, where we can be entertained, where we can stream and even make money, right? And that are available, new content available every minute of every day, creates this tendency to want to stay in touch and to stay informed, especially for children. TikTok is the same way, right? There are hundreds of hours of new videos uploaded onto TikTok every minute. And so we just can never, ever, ever stay on top of everything, which makes us more likely to feel dependent in these spaces. The other thing that I was talking about long before we were working and schooling from home was the fact that we have no places in the home that are tech-free anymore on average. There is some pretty good research out there that says that the majority of tweets from men between the ages of 25 and 50 come from when they are sitting on the toilet, right? And so we have to think about the fact that we are constantly multitasking and that these tiny little supercomputers that go with us everywhere have a profound effect. Now, the trouble is that the people who make these products, I don't believe that most tech producers or app producers make them dependent, well, I need to stop. I don't think they do anything malicious to try to hurt us. However, we know that they do have a profound and lasting impact on us. So I'm going to show you the way in which they tout themselves so that you can kind of see what I mean from here.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're watching the screen. Everything is awesome when you share it on me. The interwebs fails on springs, just to name two awesome things. A voice remote, show me angry kings, you know it's awesome. Everything, apps that please, more selfies, endless hours of the best TVs, brand new apps, shows to go, awesome internet that's super whoa. Shows, pros, foes, they're awesome. Games, flames, and waves, they're awesome. Everything you watch or send or share is awesome. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're dancing in jeans. Everything is awesome when you're watching a screen.
Xfinity.
Everything is awesome.
The future of awesome.
Right? So tech companies are happy to tell us that everything we do on screens is just incredible. And yet we know that that is not necessarily the case. Not everything that we experience on screens is amazing. And the way that I like to think about this is that there are, let's see, just a second here. I have the chat up now in case anybody needs to let me know if we get stuck. I finally figured that out. We are all, and our children are, is certainly dependent on the kind of seed that we planted into the soil. This top tree we see is, optimally growing and it's healthy, and probably if we could see the roots, we would see a healthy root system. The difficult thing is that the below is, the same maybe kind of seed. However, the contextual elements around the tree have deeply impacted the way in which it has grown and is shaped. The light that it gets, this tree is on the Oregon coast, and so it's got lots and lots of wind blowing over it, and over time it just kind of bends over. And so we know that the contextual elements that our children are growing up in and that we are raising them in will have a profound impact on their health. This is tricky because one of the primary things that is blowing over them, the primary winds, are the winds of the digital domain and of our devices that we carry with us. And we now know that they have a primary and huge impact, to the level that pediatricians and a lot of psychologists are saying that the way in which tech is impacting the development of our children is the next public health crisis. So we need to start really thinking about this, again, in non-shaming ways, because we know, especially this year more than ever, it is impossible to do this parenting and managing and moderating tech. We are reliant upon it for all of the different functions of the day: entertainment, education, vocation, connection. So we want to be very aware, to take everything that I say from the lens of any small tweaks we can make will be profound and have profound impact on our children. If you look at the little rings, if we put that tree picture back up and you look at the rings of a tree in the trunk when you cut it, and you can see how many years old it was, and you will be able to see in those years if there was drought or if there was a lack of light. You'll see in the way the ring is shaped. And very likely we and our children will have some profound shift in our being as we're through this time, both of political unrest, of global unrest, and yet even still we can. Okay, so keeping all that in mind, I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of how kind of technology is impacting us. So pre-pandemic, all of the really good long-term research studies that we had out there were telling us that the average American over the age of 12 was spending 10 and a half hours a day with screens. The way we got to that number pre-pandemic, which has to account now, is that if a person is multitasking with devices, meaning they're using their phone and they're also watching a movie on a flat screen, or they're using their desktop and they are maybe texting on their phone, and you do use 2 to 1 hour, the load on the brain, especially on the brain under the age of 25, is profound in effect, that they have a profound and deep, that they have to put those 2 hours side by side to say that 1 hour really actually looked like 2 hours because it has on the brain. That is important to know, because that 10 and a half hours a day is not like when we got tech, we just all of a sudden got more time in our day, right? It comes from really massively important developmental activities that shape children. So this 10 and a half hours a day, if you parse it out in the research, comes from these 4 activities. It comes from family and peer talk time. This is time where we are in embodied spaces and talking with each other, and we learn that we can, we learn that thing that we should never say that just sends dad off the deep end, or how to have a good argument during dinner, or how to be polite. These are really, really important lessons that we learn. It also comes from social practice. And this is a really important one for you all that I would love to help you with. We know that pre-pandemic, social anxiety was on the rise for middle school age children in particular, that we were seeing crippling amounts of social anxiety pre-pandemic. And now, if you think about the way in which this has driven us into more isolated and secluded settings, this is very likely going to be one either you or your friends will face, and we want about that. Part of what happens with technology is we have now offloaded and convenienced ourselves so much. We can order our coffee and pick it up, prepay it and pick it up at the counter, never have to interact with anybody for our kiddos. So those opportunities to just find out that you can really stoop or and live are really robbing us. And now is robbing us all of them. That time also comes from sleep. We are seeing less sleep than we've ever seen globally, and that has a lot to do with both the blue light that we expose ourselves to right up to when we go to bed, which makes our brain the blue light from our devices tells our brain to wake up and be alert. And then if we just set them down and try to sleep, we will likely have a difficult time sleeping. And then the fact that we sleep with our phones, and this is especially true for children, even if they have them on vibrate only, very likely their sleep is interrupted if they are sleeping with their phone every time some kind of message indicator comes in. And then finally, it's coming from physical activity. And physical activity is so important because it's one of the ways that the brain integrates new information, both sleep and physical activity. Sleep kind of does what neurologists call cleansing the brain, making more space for new information and new experiences to be encoded. And physical activity provides a way that the brain actually takes wiring in all different regions and integrates it so that we can have really robust and slick kind of neurological function with ease. So again, thinking about the fact that all of us, we have to become aware of how we can teach ourselves and be informed, and also help our children understand the way in which technology is impacting us. And basically, tech is impacting us in 4 important ways. Before I say that, I want to say a couple of the highlights of the pro-technology research. There's pro-tech research, there's anti-tech research, and then there's research that's trying to say, let's just be honest about the impact. Let's be moderate, because it would actually be irresponsible if we didn't help our children know how to kind of navigate the load of information that technology offers them. However, there are some really positive things that we can know about the impact of technology. Technology, we know, can lead children to be more creative in digital spaces. We don't know if it makes them more creative outside of their digital spaces, but we do know that inside the digital space, we become more creative. We also know if you have a kiddo who wants to be a surgeon or a pilot, those are going to be the children that will really benefit from more technology time. But other kiddos will really, really struggle if don't have opportunities for embodied space. The 4 areas that are I'm trying to think if there are any other pros. In other sessions, we're gonna talk a little bit more about pros and how to maximize your exposure to the kinds of technology that will add and kind of add flexibility, broaden empathy, things like that. But for tonight, we're gonna mostly focus on these first 2 and some of the deleterious or negative effects with a lot of hopeful tips, I hope. The 4 places that we know that technology really has an impact are these 4 areas. We know that technology impacts our physiology and our body. And tonight we're literally just going to focus on the brain and the way it impacts the brain. We know that technology has a huge impact on our relationships, and especially on the way that relationships develop between children and adults. We also know that the way in which we engage very profound that we think about and interact with ourselves. And that is a pretty important one that we'll talk about in future sessions. And then finally, technology is robbing us of a lot of the way in which we have been in our bodies in the past. So many experiences that we have had historically in our bodies, we now have in online spaces, and that is having an effect on the way in which we think about and use our bodies in profound ways. So tonight, though, we're going to start with effects on the brain, because these are profound. And I find that it's pretty empowering for people to know the ways in which technology is shaping their brains, because then they can make some tweaks that can really mitigate any of the negative effects. So the first thing that I want to give you is just this kind of overview of the brain. So this is the most archaic overview you will ever get of the brain. But when I was in graduate school 1,000 years ago, we really thought the brain was like a filing cabinet. And if you needed math information, you just went to the math region of the brain. Or if you needed information on file and pulled it out. We now know that actually a healthy brain looks about as unlike an organized file cabinet as possible. A healthy brain is much more akin to like a jungle with all these kind of plants and vines that are all intermixed. And we know that every time a piece of sensory data comes in through our vision, through our touch, through our ears, through our mouth, it sends electrical impulses through the brain that create these ruts in the brain, that create these pathways. And every time we repeat a behavior, that pathway gets deeper and more pronounced. That means it's much more likely that we will automatically and unconsciously fall into those ways of neurologically thinking. Now we know that the brain has these 4 regions, the upstairs and the downstairs part of the brain. The upstairs is kind of, if you think about a beach house, and the upstairs always has big windows where you can see big panoramic views and take in beauty. The upstairs part of the brain is what takes in all the information and data, sees bigger, and then can focus down very tiny to notice small elements of the big picture. The downstairs part of the brain, like that beach house, the downstairs would have, all the just to get by. The downstairs part of the brain is just the automatic walking, breathing, farting, burping part of the brain. Then we have the left and the right, and you know about these. The right side of the brain is that holistic brain. It's very creative, very expressive, uses. And the left side of the brain is all about order. This is analyst or engineer brain that is about, we do this and this happens. Now, with tech and with that 10.5 hours a day of exposure to tech time, we know that the brain overwires in certain regions and underwires in other regions, meaning the way in which we engage with our devices creates really robust pathways in, I'm going to tell you which parts of the brain, the downstairs left regions of the brain, meaning it skips or does not stimulate wiring in the upstairs right side of the brain. Now, the tricky part about that is that the upstairs right side of the brain, and then this one little region of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, are the regions of the brain that are responsible for being able to have attuned communication, being able to stop and start behavior. So if we start something we realize bad idea and we can stop it. These are the regions that are responsible for empathy and for an ability to have what psychologists call a self-knowing awareness. So a kiddo who doesn't bully has a self-knowing awareness because they know it would hurt people, or a kiddo who has, the ability to express a lot of empathy and also communicate with adults in one way, maybe in kids another, has probably a really well-developed prefrontal cortex. Now, the tricky thing is that the way that we now expose, or the way that apps expose our brains to information, really encourage kind of this ignoring of these really important regions of the brain. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples so you can see what I'm talking about. So basically, we know that where the brain fires together, it wires together, meaning the experiences that we expose the brain to create proclivities within the brain that make us capable. Meaning if we are not exposing our brain to the opportunity for boredom and being still, we literally do not create the neural pathways that enable us to be still. This means that kiddos who have had a lot of tech and who seem very distracted all the time and maybe are not living with a diagnosis of ADHD, but really are fidgety and just can't focus on one thing at a time, it isn't just that they're trying to be difficult, it's literally that their brain wiring does not provide them with what they need. So I'm going to show you what we expose our brains to, how this impacts us. I'm going to show you 3 sets of clips from Sesame Street, and I'd like you to count the length of each visual bite, meaning the sustained shot. And you'll find that in the early one, when you're counting the length of the shot before the visual changes, you'll see it's between 12 and 13. Take a look.
Sunny day, sweeping the clouds away.
don't know if you noticed, if we were together, we would be laughing and being able to kind of yell back and forth. But basically that first one from the 60s, we had visual bites that lasted between 8 and 13 seconds, meaning that the brain just learned after being exposed to that it was going to have to wait 13 seconds to get something new. Now, if you notice, and then went down to about 3 seconds for sustained shots. And in the most recent one, there is no sustained shot. There's constant movement onto the screen. So the way in which we are exposed to this and the way in which we're exposed to it everywhere on our small devices, when we're at the gas station pumping our gas and we have constant TV screens, right? When we have the TV on at dinner, the way in which that stimulates the brain, it tells the brain, you don't ever have to wait for any new information, meaning it literally doesn't wire the regions of the brain that let us be capable of boredom and of being kind of focused and still. So we tend to think then about, okay, if that's happening, how can we help the brain by dialing back our time on tech? Right now, we probably can't dial back our time on tech. And I am super empathic about that. So what I want to do is try to help you think about the other things to consider when you're thinking about the way in which technology is shaping your brains and your children's brains, and tweak those, since time is not going to be our most useful tool right now. Then we're going to talk just a tiny bit about the interpersonal way, the way that technology is shaping our interpersonal lives, especially the lives of middle school students. We have to know, and this research came out right before we went into quarantine, but we now know that social media use is not only correlated with anxiety and depression, but that social media use of 30 minutes a day, which is now considered hardly anything on social media, can actually cause anxiety and depression in middle school age children. One unique trait is to college age, it also appears to be able to cause this ambient sense of missing out that makes it very hard for children to be content in situations that they're in. The other dynamic that we don't know about causation yet with, but we do know that there is a high correlation between violent forms of media and relational aggression. Well, I should say violent forms of media and media that really glorify celebrity, which anymore most social medias, glorify the number of followers that you have. TikTok is that way for sure. So any kind of technology or apps that deliver to middle school children and high school children or young adults, kind of this idea of celebrity or of violence tends to amp up relational aggression. And in the research, relational aggression means even things like sarcastic language, eye rolling, putting down of grown people like parents. So we want to be aware that just like our brain can't focus in the same way because we haven't exposed it to opportunities to be still and silent, our constant connection to social media also creates an emotional and neurological propensity toward mental health issues. And this is a real trick. So I want to help you think about how you can think through where your kids are and how they are connecting with devices, and how we might be able to tweak some things so that you can begin to help mitigate some of these negative effects in this time where we're going to have to be impossibly connected. So if we were together, I would make us all wrap this thing, but I'm not going to do that because I can't see y'all and that just feels goofy. But I've tried to come up with a mnemonic that's easy to remember. And I want to tell you that these will all either drop in the chat a little later for you to pull, or I think Jackie also put in your parent access space where you can get them, all the worksheets and all of that kind of handout, a copy of the text. So this is just the way I remember this is ABCDT, and you can even, I'm going to show you a worksheet later that you have access to, but you can literally just take a piece of paper and write ABCDT across here, and then write each family member's name across the top, just to do a quick assessment of where there might be some issues for your kiddo and why they might be facing some difficulties. And then we can also help you figure out what you can do to make some interventions. So encourage people to 1 to 5 scale. So 1 means they can't, I'm having a struggle here, and 5 means, oh, my kiddo's doing pretty well in that area. So the first one is just the ability to, what I say is FDR, because those are initials that most Americans, and basically what those stand for are, what is my child's ability to focus on one thing at a time without being distracted? What is my child's ability to delay? Meaning, if a distraction comes before them, are they able to tune it out enough and delay kind of checking in on it in order to stay present to the task at hand? Most of us are very, very bad at this anymore. And then third is regulate. What is my child's or my ability to regulate my emotions and my thoughts? Meaning, if I just get overwhelmed by a feeling of, overstimulation, can I bring myself down? Or instead, do I keep binging on more and more and more stimulation because I don't know how to come down? So 3 things are 3 of the biggest traits that the research is kind of showing over time that are correlated with high amounts of tech use. These 3 things are also things that by making small tweaks to the kind of technology we're exposing ourselves to, we can really make a difference. So A is, what is my child or my ability to focus, delay, and regulate? This is attachment balance, just meaning and this one, again, in pandemic time, this is not going to be as easy to measure or control for. This is just about what is the balance of attachments and the way in which my child or myself connects with my attachments in embodied spaces versus. We need, for health, especially the healthy developing child, they need a balance of embodied connections and likely anymore some digital connections as well. However, while we are in pandemic, there are still some things that we can do to make sure that we can get our kids contacts that will be very important for addressing this. See, this one I always say, this would get me in a lot of trouble itself. This is context and content. Basically what that means is that the content that we consume online, both the quality of it and the pace at which it moves, and the actual content it delivers us can have a profound effect on our physiological health. Also, the context within which we consume or interact with our devices has an impact. If we are constantly turning away from social opportunities or opportunities to be out in the world in order to engage with our devices, that's going to be an issue. Devotion, this in our culture, this is a ring finger that oftentimes shows if you're devoted or committed to someone. This just means how devoted to your devices are you for your everyday functioning? Can you go to a restaurant that just smells and looks good with reading 8 reviews? I mean, sometimes we just need to risk food poisoning for the sake of spontaneity and the well-being of our brains, right? Can we read a book without reading reviews? Can we watch a movie that somebody else might not like but that we think we might like? Can we get anywhere if we forget our phone someplace? Do we know how to navigate directions? Do we know anybody's phone numbers anymore? This is a big one, and I think this is going to be one of the things that we're talking about, which is as things begin to reopen and we feel like we've lost some of our functioning, and the World Health Organization is talking about that. Then finally, time. So we tend to say we need to lock down on time. Time is only relevant when we think about technology and children in relationship to these other 4 domains. If your child has a great ability to focus, they can delay gratification, they can come to emotional regulation, they're pretty confident and competent in embodied spaces and digital spaces, content is really, doing research around how to cure Ebola or how to build a tree house, or, really life-giving and life-affirming, and, they're pretty comfortable without the digital domain, then they can afford to have more time with tech without it being harmful or detrimental. If, however, one of these is out of whack, like a child is outside of the tech domain, or their content is highly sexualized or violent, those kind of things we're going to want to then, rather than thinking about time, we're going to want to think specifically about how to tailor their engagement in the digital domain along with time. The 2 things I will tell you just that are out there in the research about time is that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs both limited their children to 30 minutes a day with devices. That is saying something when the people who develop this stuff want their kids only interacting with 30 minutes. The other thing that we now know is that the Waldorf school system is the only school system in the US that doesn't introduce technology until the sophomore year of high school. And we now have the highest number of Waldorf schools per capita, with the longest waiting lists in our country in Silicon Valley, meaning that the place where all our hardware and apps are created, those people do not want their children in schools that integrate a lot of tech. So we need to take that into mind, because really, again, they're not being malicious, but their goal is to make money, and money doesn't tend to drive always great child development principles. So we need to be aware of that. Okay, in terms of that content and context piece, I want to give you just a quick idea of the kinds of technology that are particularly very dependent forming, very addictive in some ways, and that also can have a little more of a negative impact on the brain and relationships. So these kinds of content are violent, sexualized, a lot of video games really mix those two. Monetized, meaning that they're data driven, kind of social media or anything, you have to watch advertisements to get in. And then also platforms that have multiple functions, which most of our platforms do now, where you can both message and post and send money. These are all created with something we don't have time to talk about tonight, but it's called the hidden curriculum. And it's basically to really, the whole goal of platforms are to keep us connected and to make us want more. So we tap out on a little bit that used to give us pleasure, and we need more to give us pleasure. Okay, so let's all take a collective big deep breath. Now that we feel like we know what's happening, we're going to just talk for a few minutes about something we can do even starting this week. And then again, remembering that we're going to have time for you to ask questions, and we're going to have, more sessions that we can come back to. So the first thing that we can do is really understand that as we try to make any changes, it's going to require a lot of patience, and we're going to probably, as families, have to really amp up our attendance to teaching self-soothing, to doing things like talking about, we're going to make some changes in the way in which we engage our tech. And so I'm going to ask that when we do that, or when you get upset about something that we've decided we're going to do, and I'm just going to say deep breath, and we're all going to take a deep breath together, and then we'll negotiate. Or some families adopt us, we're going to stop, drop, and roll. So when we make a change and somebody's getting upset about it, we're just going to stop the floor, and we're going to kind of have a little rolling conversation about how we're feeling. There are lots of techniques I can share with you, but I do need to tell you that we try to change these things, especially the social media piece. Very likely you and your children are highly dependent upon social media for connection with friends. And we can't just yank it away, because that's like yanking out the support of a bridge. It would just crumble, and our children will crumble. So we need to be able to really work at soothing. We also need to work at building buy-in. We cannot hope to change this and to help kind of reverse some of the changes or make some tweaks by just coming in as authoritarian know-it-alls. We will fail every time. One of the beautiful things about my work is that I get to work with, or go speak at a middle school. And a couple of years ago, I did a meditation with a middle school group, 800 children. We for 10 minutes were silent and laid on the floor. And I think the only reason that it worked is because I get buy-in. I talk about how much this is just trying something new. This is not me demonizing what you all love. But we have to work at getting that buy-in. So one of the things I want to challenge you to do tonight is to think about how you can your children and how their technology feels to them, as you begin to think about how to have these non-shaming conversations and make some switches. The other thing we have to do is have as many yeses available to our kids as we have nos. So if we're going to say, hey, I'm realizing that maybe playing Grand Theft Auto 5 for an hour is probably not helpful to your brain, and we're going to, I want to help you start dialing that back. We're going to onboard some strategy games that don't involve violence, and also I want to find some other things to say yes to. Can we build a skateboard ramp outside? Can we build a form on and buy or whatever it is that's your child's special thing? And I'm going to give you some ideas of small things like that you can around the house. In terms of self-soothing, some things to try, you can start talking with your family about regulation, just that it's really important that we be able to, at the end of the day, we have really bought the lie in America that our devices soothe us. So at the end of the day, we want to either, game, or we want to binge on Netflix or binge on social media or on Pinterest hours. And there's no research that shows that any of those activities are actually soothing to the brain or the body. In fact, they create stimulation in a way that stimulates alertness. So we want to think about how can we, at least some of the time, come ourselves away from our screens. So zones of regulation is something where you can just talk with your family about, we're gonna talk about our emotional states as we are in a green state, meaning we're good to go. We don't feel overstimulated, we don't feel we're kind of okay. We can handle information and interactions. Or maybe I'm in a yellow zone where I'm just kind of right on the edge of not being okay and of moving into a place of really big feelings that are going to make it such that I'm not going to be able to work very well with folks. Or I'm in a red zone, which means I'm close to tantruming or being really upset. And you can use these within your family to say like, hey, are you in a green zone so we can talk about something? And if they say, no, I'm in a red zone, being able to kind of navigate and negotiate. We can also create regulation stations in our homes, even if we're living in tiny spaces where we're all stuck together. A couple families, since I've been doing these talks during pandemic, have set baskets with pillows and blankets outside their bathrooms with bathtubs. And if anybody who needs it can take the pillows and blankets and put them in the bathtub, moments of breathing or reading or quiet with doors shut where they can be alone without screens, that can help. I'm going to hold off on a couple of these and we'll talk about them in other sessions when we talk about self-soothing, but I do want to talk about breathing because breathing is one of the quickest ways of regulating, of slowing down the central nervous system, which the central nervous system with constant stimulation, that last Sesame Street that we saw with constantly shifting images, it's actually quite dysregulating to both the hormonal system. It releases or it triggers the release of adrenaline, and also to the neurological system. That kind of constant stimulation triggers the release of neurotransmitters that are related to kind of alertness and fight, flight, freeze, or faint. So by just taking a breath, 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths actually slows the central nervous system down and can really help. So I suggest these for families because you can have them sitting all around the house. They're called Doberman spheres. And when someone is too tied into their device or something, you toss this to them and they have to catch it. And basically it triggers the thinking that a really cleansing, regulating breath is one with 2 principles. The first principle is that we're going to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. So it's kind of like smelling the roses, blowing out the candles. And the second principle is that we want to expand our belly and make it big on the inhale. So we want to expand our belly, make it big. And then on the exhale, we want to drop it down, make it small. 3 of those can help us turn away from our devices with immense benefit. And the research is really good on it. Okay, so the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to share with you my ideas. I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 days trying to think about, okay, the pandemic and the limits and the needs with tech, the needs for our kids to have some breaks. And I've tried to identify 5 things and I've put them forward in this way. If you, as a parent, which I have such empathy for and can totally understand, if you only have it in you to try to make 1 tweak with your tech this month, the biggest bang for your buck that you can get would be to try to start getting a hold on multitasking, meaning using 1 device at a time or helping your child to use 1 device at a time. When they are trying to do learning outside of school, using only 1 app or platform at a time. So rather than having chat open while they're working on a paper or they're watching YouTube and working on a paper, really trying as hard as you can to talk about this. This is the one thing that has the most profound effect both on emotional regulation and the ability to focus. So maybe even setting aside times where you as a family literally have monotasking times where you are just listening to a song and that's it. I like to talk about, my new work is on boredom, like 10 minutes of a boredom party, meaning you have some really compelling fidgets around, which we're going to talk about in a bit, and you engage those as a family for 10 minutes with no devices. It's going to be uncomfortable for us to do this, and it's going to be very uncomfortable for our children to do this, which means it's probably pretty important that we learn to do it, and we're going to have to practice. So that's the one thing. If you can do 2 things, if you feel like you have it in you to do 2 things, these are them. So the first is getting a hold on multitasking. The second one is just to begin exploring the kinds of digital spaces your child's spending time in and start non-shaming conversations. This means going on TikTok and watching some TikToks, not to shame your child or get freaked out, for you yourself to understand these spaces, to go take some time and be in Twitch, to look around YouTube and see what you just come up with, so that you aren't just coming in from this kind of authoritarian perspective, but so that you have some empathy and some awareness, and so that your children feel safe telling you these things. You know, one of the things that we really need to talk with our children about is porn, because porn is so quickly addictive and so quickly captures the attention. And yet so many parents are so scared to do it. And yet what I have found now over the course of 15 years is if we do it in the right way and start these conversations in the right way, our children are so relieved. So an example of that would be if I want to start having conversations with my kiddos about the sexual content that they get in places, I might say something like, you know, I'm realizing that just a basic search on the internet gets you all kinds of stuff that like sexual and physical that makes you feel really weird and really excited. And I'm wondering what that's like for you. And so that's, you know, just these kind of very casual ways of having these conversations. Okay, if you can do 3 things, the third thing I would love to encourage you to do is to plan at least one in-person COVID safe get together, or add some embodied offerings to your home. So by embodied offerings, what I mean are things that your kiddo or you will likely put your phones down for, and to leave them out and about. This is one of the favorite ones that I found lately. It's a perplexus. It's a maze within a ball, and it's pretty complex. And these things have to be out where you can easily grab them. This one is another popular one, Kinetic Sand, having bowls of this everywhere, and just, you know, having them so that you forget that your phone is even there. This one is actually from Jeremy and Judy and Ethan and Ella, and it's one of the favorites everywhere I go. It's called Magic Cubes, and it doesn't require any cognitive ability. You're not solving anything. And the really cool thing about it is it comes apart, and then it has these 2 parts that you can play with. These like spinner wheels, these don't have to be expensive, you know, these kinds of things. These are brain flakes, having these in a bowl where they're easy to access, and all kinds, etch sketches, all kinds of things. In COVID safe gathering, I have a pediatrician who I check everything out with, and so I ran these ideas by her, and she told me to remind you all that you're very fortunate you live in Long Beach. Most of the places that I am speaking are snowy and rainy right now, but you know, so doing something like a beach get together where everybody's masked and you are 6 feet apart. This is another great one, ice blocking. You get an ice block at a convenience store, and you put a towel on it, go to a park that has hills after dark, and you slide down the ice blocks. Because these things, we want some of these to be a little edgy. If we don't give our kids embodied opportunities to have edgy experiences, they will 100% of the time find them in online spaces. So we want sometimes to be the ones that help them find them. This is another one for during the pandemic. You have to be kind of far apart to play it, and you never touch anything other than your own scoop, so you're not touching the ball. It's another great safe way. I'm sure some of you have seen this, you know, gathering in a circle, and the parents can even bring chairs and gather a little over to the side. The kids can stay and visit through the window. But our children do desperately need some social connection right now. The World Health Organization, along with the American Psychological and Psychiatric Association, as well as the Pediatric Association of America, are all finding the mental health needs of children skyrocketing. And the suicide rate is also very high right now. So we want to make sure that as we are making good choices about physical health during COVID, we're also considering mental health as part of the equation. Okay. If you can add one more thing, I would love to encourage you to take that information that we used from the 5 quadrants and just use this worksheet that will be in your packet or that Jackie can get to you, and do a little quick assessment with everybody in your family and just see where they are and how they're doing, including yourselves, and use that for some planning. And then if you are able to do 5 things this month, this one I think would get you all the extra credit in the world. This 5th one is just all about finding either embodied experiences that you can do and do safely, because we really have to amp up those yeses right now in order to hope to diminish even little bits of our tech use, or engage in digital experiences that are slower moving, that are high quality, and that are non-addictive, so that we can begin stepping down some of that violent, sexualized, monetized, highly comparative, highly celebrity-based kinds of access. And we want to really make sure that we have these slower moving, high quality, non-addictive forms. So that means we want, oh, let me actually a slide here. Yes, I see the comment about listing the things that kids can touch and play with. I should have included that in the handout. I have a form that I will send you all. I'll send to Jackie to get to you all of all my favorite things, and I'll make sure you get that later tonight. So we want to make sure these are the things, if we're going to take that fifth step, we want to make sure we're really assessing the tech we're using, and making sure we find tech that is not, it does not require multitasking. So it actually requires us to kind of be focused in one place at one time. Maybe turning off push notifications would be something, or alerts. We want to try to diminish or decrease as much as we can spaces where there's verbal kind of overwhelming verbal violence or physical violence. We want to be really aware of sexually driven or of gender rigid content. So like, for instance, the Disney Channel is one of the most gender rigid sexualized channels for middle school age children that I know of. It's just very the underpinnings are very driven by kind of competition and hyper appearance, a lot of concern about body dysmorphia and things for kiddos who watch a lot of that. We also want to just think about monetized content, so content that where our data is saved and then used to affect our algorithm, because that is highly, it creates a high sense of self-centricity and narcissism, and it also keeps us pretty inflexible cognitively, which is important. And then those platforms that allow us to do everything within them, because that means that we are likely to spend more time in those spaces and also get more kind of juice, both neurologically and adrenal wise, and that feeds addiction. And then also any technology that really allows for isolation or is non-relational. So even if your kiddo is a big gamer, it's probably better for them in this time of pandemic for them to be playing games in networked ways with friends than it is for them to just be playing solo, because it requires at least some, as long as there isn't bullying in those spaces. Well, we'll talk about that another time. Common Sense Media is your best resource for how to get kind of buy-in tips and also step-down approaches. So if your kiddo really loves the strategy involved in games and really enjoys gaming, you can go there and say, okay, I want a high strategy game that's visually beautiful, that is appropriate for a 13-year-old, because GTA 5, which has the best strategy and graphics, is not appropriate for a 13-year-old in terms of the way in which that will impact the brain. So again, we want to find these substitutes that are edgy and kind of fiery. We want to get buy-in with our kiddos, and then we want to think about kind of that step down approach, meaning we're going to increase exposure to fiery embodied experiences and healthy experiences that are high quality, while we're at the same time trying to step in small increments on the stuff that can be harmful. In terms of fidgets, and I will send you that list, you want fidgets that aren't cognitive. So you want things that have repetition of movement, which is, you know, like the rail thing that I showed you, or the Hoberman sphere. And you want body movement over object movement. So like those fidget spinners, you don't really have to do much other than move your hand. Like things like this, you're really moving your arms, you're having to use some visual spatial concepts to try to do different things with the ball. So you want as much physical engagement as you can. This is just in case you want to take, yeah.
You were paused, or your video is paused right now, so we can't see what you're doing.
Oh, thank you for letting me know that. I was just moving this fidget toy that has a lot of balls, and so that you have to kind of physically manipulate. This is just a slide that just says those 5 things we could do, which you'll have in the handout. And these are ways that you can reach me. I especially use Instagram to kind of give parents ideas of ways of interacting with their kiddos, and
here's the thing
finally,
that she was doing.
that is the thing that I was doing, and hopefully by not sharing video that will stop. I really hope it wasn't so glitchy the whole time.
I don't think it was the whole time. It was just, we caught up, but just that one time when you're like, it's just like this, and then so I just got this delivered to me.
Yay! So everybody can bring themselves back into the video, I think, now, because I'm hoping that without me sharing video, everyone can pop back on. I'm so sorry about that. I also want to tell you, I had a slide that I skipped. The publisher has offered a discount on the book, and I sent that to Jackie. It's in the resource handout. If you do want to order the book at a discount, it's there. But I just gave you everything important from the book.
And it's awesome. Totally worth it.
So, are there questions or comments or feedback? I would love any of them.
I'm just going to start and say thank you for doing this. This is amazing and incredible information. And even though there were little glitches here with video or hearing you, I feel amazed that this is this is your sister-in-law, yes? Yeah, that we have such amazing people at our school that she knows you and that you have all this knowledge and such compassion, because this really is an unprecedented era that we're living in. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
this is definitely my life work, because I'm so concerned for kiddos and so empathically driven for parents.
Sorry.
Don't be afraid to ask all the questions. Or I could review these toys if you want. Yeah. Okay, so this one is Kinetic Sand. My favorite two brands are either the Kinetic Sand brand or Mind Matter, which is M-A-T-R. This is a Hoberman sphere. This is a Perplexus, and they have all different kinds. And this is it's a maze ball. It's wonderful. These are either usually called brain flakes or snowflakes, and these are one of the favorite things in my house. I just have big bowls of them everywhere, and they just fit together, kind of like, I don't know if you can see, you can make shapes. This is, I got this at Moma, and it's called the wooden ball Moma Fidget. If you get it at the Museum of Modern Art store, these you can get everywhere. Rail spinners, and this is magic cubes. This, I got a bunch of these last time I was at Daiso, and I'm getting amazing reviews from them. These are just, you can make them straight or into a square. It's just a little plastic manipulative. This, I also, if you have video gamers in your home, I didn't talk about these, but any kind of handheld manipulative game, this one is penguins, and you put them on here, and then there are different challenge cards. Rush Hour is a particularly favorite one for middle school kids. And then another great old fashioned, just the Etch-a-Sketch is also a great tool. And I will bring more and new and different things next time. But the important thing about all these is, we don't tolerate messes very well, or having things out and about, but we tolerate having our phones out and about all the time. It's important to leave these things out so they're easily accessible. If they're tucked away and you have to go get them, you're not likely to do it. So making sure they're easily available.
I have a question. Doreen, I love how you talked about, well, one of the steps, the one that's sticking with me is the multitasking. And I know that my kids love to, even like the Minecraft club that one of them is in at IVA, they are playing Minecraft while they're on their Discord. And I know I'm doing it all day long, but it always, seeing my own child doing it feels like it's, can you say something about that multitasking and why it's so, can you give me more words around that again?
Yeah, so I should also say that pre-pandemic, I would not agree to speak to parents unless I had 3 hours, which I know seems like forever, but I promise it goes really fast. But it's because we just can't, it's such a huge topic. But the thing about multitasking is that in all the pro-tech research, the researchers say that one of the best, two of the best positive traits of technology use are that we become good, what do they call it there? They call it task switchers. We become incredibly efficient at switching tasks, And we become really good at what they call asynchronous communication, meaning we can have little bits of a conversation without finishing it, and then we go to another, and then we come back to it here and there. The tricky thing is that the research outside of the digital domain about asynchronous communication is that it's very harmful for relationships and does not lead to a sense of personal satisfaction or connection with people. And the research on task switching outside of the digital domain shows to a 100%, so 100% of the research on multitasking and task switching is that it diminishes our sense of satisfaction in completing a task. It also diminishes the quality of our outcome of our task, and it diminishes the ability of the brain or any kind of wiring in that prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible basically for tuning out something and being able to tend to one thing. And so while we may not feel, because we have, again, for a lot of kids now, really, they don't feel like they can be calm unless they are overly stimulated. And that's because we've we've missed this important part of the brain that may end up being okay for them most of their lives. But what I'm learning now from the young adults who are now kind of in their late 20s, early 30s, who I started working with when they were in college, they are feeling like they are very grateful that they started privileging some experiences where they did have to only do one thing at a time, because they're finding in their work situation or in their primary relationships now as adults, those are the things that lead to greater satisfaction and success, is being able to hold off. So I like to think about trying to teach kids how to not only, I like to think about it as like, it's fine to try to be a great task switcher and multitasker, as long as we are also learning how to, some of the time, do one thing at a time. So it's all about that balance piece. And it's related to life satisfaction, success, quality of our product, and our ability to tolerate the kind of focus that we will need. What's called deep work, is, being able to push past our discomfort at focusing in order to get a more high quality result. Does that answer?
Yeah, definitely. I love it. And it's helpful for me as reasons and reminders for having singular focus. Thank you.
It's challenging, and nothing in our day-to-day world anymore rewards that. So if we're going to work at being better focusers, being able to do deep work, we're going to have to prepare our environment that we're going to be slower to respond, that we're going to maybe take longer to do tasks. And I think we also have to kind of accommodate for that with our children if we're going to ask them to do the same.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting, when my daughter was younger, I would have to commute a lot for work. So we spent a lot of time in the car, and rather than have her be bored, I would play videos for her. She would have movies and videos. And so she's become accustomed to having something to entertain her while she's in the car or in a meeting or whatever. So are you suggesting that I did her a disservice in I've stunted her development, and now she doesn't know how to be bored? And if you are suggesting that, what is the remedy now that she's 12?
So first of all, every one of us does things every single day that impact our kiddos. And so this isn't about like, oh, you've stunted, shame on you. Not at all. I really believe we are all doing the best we can all the time. Yes, the way in which we now can avoid boredom has become, I think, problematic for some kids, because it isn't just that they're uncomfortable, it's literally that they don't have the experience with it. So one of the reasons that I think I mentioned my new work is called Welcome to My Boredom Party. And the reason I'm trying to sell boredom is that the research on boredom is profound. And we actually even know now that 10 minutes a day for 4 months sustained of boredom practice, which could look like mindfulness or being bored in a car ride. That's one of the things in the research. 10 minutes of being able to tolerate that without kind of getting worked up actually shows that there's doubling in the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So that part of the brain that is responsible for all these things we need in success, like empathy, attuned communication, self-knowing awareness, being able to stop if something is hurting us, is benefited by us becoming comfortable with boredom. So even taking small opportunities, if every family could commit to starting out with a 3-minute boredom practice once a day and then build up to 10, that would be incredible. And that's where all of these kinds of things that don't require any kind of cognitive skill, but that can keep our hands busy, can be really, really helpful. And in the car, the same thing. You know, you could take a bowl of kinetic sand, you could take whatever. And at first there is going to be pushback because they're going to be so uncomfortable. And we are too. I mean, I know I am sometimes. So we have to prepare for it. That's where we have to become really good listeners and kind of creative thinkers about what is it that our kids easily put their phone down for without even realizing it. Is it when there are new paints out, or when there's an amazing picture book out, or a graphic novel, or when I let them light incense? You know, incense is a big new one I've been encouraging parents to, because you watch it float. And, you know, most incense sticks last about 15 minutes. And so to say, like, I just want you to watch the incense for 15 minutes. Then you can binge on whatever else. Like, you know, anything like that will be really helpful. And thank you for being vulnerable and asking that question. It's really hard.
That was helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
I have a on that. Oh, sorry. I just have a question on that topic about boredom. So,
Deborah, you're cutting out a lot.
My son has a problem being bored, and I was telling him boredom is good for him. But I love that.
You're cutting out.
Oh, sorry.
You might have to turn your video off.
Can you hear me better? Let me move.
Yep. Go for it.
Is it better there?
Go ahead, and I think we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect.
Okay.
Did somebody else have a question?
Is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was just saying on that note, I think my son has a problem being bored sometimes, and I always tell him, like, boredom is good for you, but oh, I said, I think my son sometimes has a problem with being bored, and I know it's good for him to be bored. But my question is,
I think if you can type the question part in the chat, that would be amazing.
Can you hear me?
I think putting it in the chat would be great.
Oh, okay. So my question is, you're saying, like, as long as it's not technology, say we do 10 minutes a day of being bored, they can do other things, or should they just be doing nothing?
Ideally, the 10 minutes would be doing pretty much nothing. That's going to be your ultimate goal. But you might have to start with 3 minutes.
Chat, I suppose.
And then anything, yes, some of the time also engaging in embodied activities so that there's kind of a balance.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Hello.
If you can type that would be amazing.
Okay, I will do that.
I can put it in the chat.
Doreen?
Yeah.
But this is Anne Marie. So I may be just picking off the parent. I don't even understand what boredom means. Does that mean like we just go lay on the grass and do nothing for 3 minutes? Do we interact?
Okay.
I guess
Okay.
I don't know what boredom means.
Yeah. So boredom in this context would mean as close to doing nothing as you can. The Dutch refer to it as niksen, which is Niksen. And it means doing nothing deliciously. And there is real power and potency in that kind of feeling like you can be quiet and still with yourself and tolerate it. And we're going to talk about that next time. When we can't do that, when everything has to come from the outside of us, we are actually pretty fragile. And we don't have grit or resilience, which are two traits that we really, really need. So as close to doing nothing as possible that you can get is great. But successive approximations, things like, doing embodied things more than just digital things for a period of time, even that will help. And again, the only hope we have of our children tolerating boredom is to teach them self-soothing, which they have largely not had to learn. They've stimulated themselves instead of soothing themselves. They're just overstimulated. So we have to do the active work of teaching them how to self-soothe.
The awesome thing, and because this is it's a challenge for us as well, and we know this, but we have the teacher in our family, but it's a struggle as well, and one of the things is that whenever your kid says like I'm bored, then you get to call that a win. You're like, yay! So whenever they say I'm bored, you can own that and kind of internally celebrate that. It's all up to you whether you celebrate in their faces or quietly, but you get to now call that a win. So there's that.
Yeah.
Well, any last question? Okay, I guess what I would love to ask is if folks are willing to, I'll put my email in the chat here, email me or Jackie or Judy or the PTA, Gina, right? I think, is it Gina? Questions or things you would really like to make sure that you hear about, in our next 2 sessions. I'm really happy to tailor things in that, or, along the lines of what you all need.
And Doreen, I wonder if it's okay in just the last minute before everyone checks out, if we could put one thing in the chat that's sort of sticking with us so that we're going to hold on to, keep thinking about. It helps me so much to think of my own, but then also to see the rest of yours. So if you could, before you leave tonight, can you stick one thing in the chat that is sticking with you the most, or you want to keep thinking on?
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of appreciations to the work that you're doing here tonight in the chat also. I hope you've gotten to see those.
Thank you all. I love all these comments. Beautiful.
Doreen, should you and I read a few of the comments so that they get on the recording too?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it. That'd be great.
So, I know Rachel Gordon's one of our teachers. She said 10 minutes of boredom. I need that. And Anne Marie said, thank you so much for teaching us to teach our children about self-soothing through boredom. Man, 2 teachers. Paul Burns also 10 minutes of boredom per day. Can't wait to assign this for home thinking. And Claudia said we have to teach our kids to be bored. Do you want to read any of them, or should I just keep going?
I'll try to find a better balance between limiting out of school screen time and allowing online socialization. It's a challenge, but I know we can do better. I want to get a hold of my multitasking. I have the false belief that if I'm not multitasking, then I'm wasting time. That is such a huge thing. And psychologically, I will tell you, your brain and body and the entire world needs you to waste time. It's because it isn't wasting time. It's actually having idle time, which is so important.
I see.
Boredom is healthy. I love.
I mean, Judy, you're like a ringer, but I love the way that you put that Borden is quiet and healthy. Yeah. And then Jackie said one thing that sticks with me is that the most is how affirming it can be to allow our kids to be bored. Really seemed to hit a key there. So nice. Thank you so much, Doreen. And I know that our next night is in February, and then we get another in March, and that you've encouraged people to email any questions that they have before that. Anything else for us before we leave? No.
I'll try to, I know I have some more on boredom somewhere. I'll try to find some links to send to Jackie, but there's also a ton of stuff on my website and videos you can share with your kiddos even that are there too.
Can you say what your website is?
Yeah, it's DoreenDM.com. So DoreenDM.com.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you all.
Enjoy
for me.
I'm gonna play some music to send us back into our evenings. And you guys have a good evening.
Every day it's a getting closer.
Good night.
Closer. Love like yours will surely come my way. Hey, hey, hey.